Of the Newburyport Community Preservation Committee. And I'd like to welcome all people in the room and say I'm glad to see people face to face in the room after so long a time. Also welcome all people attending by Zoom. It's a for me personally, it's good to see faces, to meet people face to face. And I'm happy to be here. We're here tonight to hear presentations from several applicants for this year's docket of grants. We have some short business to do in advance. And one of those items is we're welcoming to the table Andrea Wheatman, who is a pending appointment as an at-large member of the committee, and still needing to have her name presented to City Council for the second reading. And we expect that she will be sworn into the committee prior to our deliberations after the next meeting of applicant presentations. So she is here to listen, learn, and ask questions because she will be voting by that time. Next, we have something that's a carryover from actually last fall because we didn't have folks present that we needed to have present to elect the chair and vice chair for the coming year. So we will do that tonight, and our vice chair is attending on Zoom. Before I do that, I'd like for the minutes to do a roll call of those present. Okay, we have Jane, you're present on Zoom. Chuck Griffin? Yes. Tom O'Brien is absent. Biff Bouse? Bouse. Yeah. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Biff Bouse is present. Joe Texera?
Present.
Jamie Gagnon?
Present.
Jennifer Bluestein? Not present. And Andrea is present. Okay, thank you. I will entertain nominations for chair. First of all, I'll entertain nominations for vice chair from members of the committee.
I move that Jane Healy be nominated, be appointed as vice chair.
Second.
There's a second. Any discussion? Any other nominations? No? Okay, all in favor of Jane Healy being vice chair for the coming year? Please raise your hand. Jane, you're on.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, I think. I'll entertain nominations for chair.
I'll move that Mike Doucette be the chair of the CPC.
I second.
Any discussion? Any further nominations? All those in favor of Mike Doucette being chair for the coming year? Thank you. Committee. Number 3 on the project update and withdrawal of the request for restoration of the Swan Fountain application.
Would you like me to sit here?
Please.
Thank you all. So I submitted a letter to you all regarding the project, but thought it might be a good idea just to come and speak a little bit about where we are. Unfortunately, after many, many years of permitting and approvals and whatnot, the bids did come in higher than what we were expecting. It's very disappointing. So we've decided to pause the project for the moment. We already have members of our Port Parks Alliance writing grants and trying to come up with other fundraising ideas to bridge the gap. So we'd like to formally withdraw both the bond allocation that we had requested last year, as well as this year's request for the Swan Fountain restoration. We would like to kindly request that you hold some bonding capacities so that we can come back and re-request the bond to do the project. There was a question about outstanding accounts from you all. We have three. The first one in the letter is actually inaccurate. The specimen trees at Bartlett Mall. There was 7,700 and change left in the account. That's now down to $4,887.37. The parks manager is slowly replacing and adding in missing trees around the upper ring of the mall and would like to continue to do that work. Some of that occurred last fall, and so there was a lag in the update of the dollar amount in the account. The second was a Swan Fountain restoration allocation from a few years ago for just under $126,000. We would like to request a formal extension to hold on to that funding, which will allow us leverage for matching funds as we request grants and other donations. And the third is the walkway. We have just over $11,500 remaining in that account, which again, that work will be done as the larger project moves forward, but having that amount remaining, that remaining balance will allow us to fundraise and match other grants. The frog pond improvements, which was the larger amount from a few years ago, I think it had just over 200,000, has been expended completely. That was used for design engineering to get us to the point where we are now with a shovel-ready project.
Okay. So neither the walkway, nor obviously, nor the fountain open projects can go forward without the full
Correct.
Pond, mal improvement.
Correct.
Okay. Is there any sense of, when you might be back with a ready project with numbers?
I am hoping, for your next cycle.
Next cycle? Okay. All right, in terms of. Okay, so the request is to withdraw the present application.
Correct.
So we won't be considering that in this cycle. Two, also, it would be the function of the CPC to recommend on your ask, to recommend to city council to pull back that bond
Okay.
and not go out with it. And that is your ask for us
That
to
is
do
my
that.
ask.
Okay, okay. I believe, since this all filters down to the bottom line of an adjusted budget for this year's cycle, we would be formalizing those recommendations, both to withdraw the bond and to extend the open projects. Vote on them at the time we do deliberations on all the projects that are asking for grants this cycle.
Okay.
Okay. Are there any questions from the committee about this? Okay.
Do you need a motion for that?
No, not at this point. Okay, I don't see any questions here that I have. I would ask if any members of the public present have any questions. Do we see anyone tuned in by Zoom?
There's one attendee on Zoom.
Okay. Any Zoom participants, please raise your hand if you have questions for this applicant. See no questions? Okay. Tim, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Right. Next, we go to our main section of the agenda, which are the other presentations for requests for funding that are going to proceed. We do have one that has been rescheduled. That's 4B on your agenda, the Meeting House roof replacement. They have been rescheduled for March 7th. So the first one on this list, and before I get to that, generally speaking, for newer members to the committee and to members of the public that are tuned in, we generally proceed with a presentation from the applicant. We ask the applicants to assume that the committee members have read their applications thoroughly, and so we're tuned into the details, and ask that their presentations be limited if possible to around 10 minutes maximum, and to present to us what you consider to be the most important details to review, and any new information that would add to your application that we haven't seen yet. After the presentation, there'll be questions from the committee. And after that, we will open the questions to members of the public. And that will proceed in that manner for each applicant. So members of the public, please have your questions ready for the application at the time that application is heard. Okay, first on our list is the YWCA Market Street Apartments. Request from the YWCA for $15,750.
Okay. I'm gonna sit.
You can sit, stand, whatever's comfortable for you.
Right here.
Okay,
Thank you. My name is David Webster. I'm on the Affordable Housing Committee of the YWCA. We've requested $15,750, basically, for the upkeep of the exterior of the building. The Market Street Apartments are adjacent to the main YWCA building on Market Street. It's a 10-unit community. 6 of the units are for extremely low-income households, which means they're households that have incomes at 30% area median income or less. And then 4 of the other units are for households at 50% area median income or less, which is considered very low income, I believe, under the HUD terminology. So of the 10 units, 6 are studios, 2 are 1 beds, and 2 are 2 beds. I believe that the majority of the units, likely with the exception of the 2 beds, are occupied by individuals. Just so to put the income limitations in context, 30% of area median income for a family of 1 is $31,150, or $35,600 for a family of 2. For 50% of area median income, and there's 4 units that fall into that category. Family income will be $51,950 for an individual, or $59,400 for a 2-person family. The Y has diligently tried to minimize rent increases at this property for several years. So the actual rents that the Y collects on these units is actually significantly below the rents that would be indicated by the HUD standards that we outlined. So at 30% of AMI, monthly rent for a studio, would be $778. The current rents that the Y is achieving is $530. The $1,298 for a studio, for someone at 50% of AMI or less. The Y is, collecting rents between $725 and $1,000 for those studios for folks at 50% of AMI. So the point is that the rents are suppressed to allow people to stay housed. There are several individuals in this community, formerly homeless individuals, who've been able to stay housed at this property for as long as 10 years. So by keeping the rents low, we're able to house some of the most vulnerable folks in our community. Keeping the rents low also means that the operating budget's extremely tight. Inflation's a reality, everybody knows that. Things like utilities, insurance, maintenance, staffing have all increased significantly. But we're keeping the rents down so that we can keep people housed. And that means there's not much left to invest in the property itself. So that's really sort of the reason for the request.
Am I correct that, when the expansion was done in 2013 and the rehabilitation of the building, that, there was, CPA money involved in that?
Yeah, that's my understanding.
Yes,
I have to acknowledge that I've been with the Y for a year.
right, no, I understand, I was around then, so
Okay.
I just wanted to be sure that I wasn't thinking wrongly about this project.
That's my
Yeah,
understanding.
I believe that,
Yeah.
CPA funds did assist, significantly in the creation of some of these units,
Yes.
that are in there. Okay, good. Is it correct too that you're serving a rental, a tenant community that doesn't otherwise have options in this city?
Right, I mean, as I
I
said,
can speak to that also. I work for the YWCA. I'm the family support worker. And I do the.
Your name?
Jacqueline Mears.
Okay,
And we have multiple residents living there that would otherwise be in nursing home facilities, and we're able to get them in home care
Mhm.
so that they're able to maintain in the community as well.
thank you. Okay. Any other questions from the committee? No? Okay, let me be sure I haven't missed any here. Can you describe for us the type of condition you're seeing on the building that is of concern to is of concern because of water penetration and danger to the structural aspects of the building?
yeah, I mean, there's, it's an 1890s building. It's an antique building. A lot of buildings in Newburyport, it is in keeping with the character of the neighborhood and the city as a whole, but like I'm sure a lot of folks here understand with their own homes, it requires a lot of work. And so there are gaps in joints. There's, cracked clapboards and shingles and things like that. So there's a lot of opportunity for water to penetrate the building, between caulking, fixing those issues and painting the building. The goal is just to, seal it up tight as best as possible.
Committee questions? Any members of the public? Questions? Seeing no questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We can move on. Thank you. I'll remind everyone that, there's, no deliberations or determination of recommendations of any of these, projects that we're hearing, today and on March 7th. There will be a, meeting on, help me out here, when's the deliberations meeting?
21st of March first.
March 21st, when the, committee will, reconvene in a public meeting for our deliberations, and voting at that time on what projects that we will recommend and in what amounts. Okay, next on the, list of presentations we have, is the, Perkins Art and Research Center Phase 2, Historical Society of Old Newbury, $77,536. Hello, Bethany.
Hello, everyone. I'm Bethany Graftero. I'm the Executive Director of the Museum of Old Newbury, which is also the Historical Society of Old Newbury. We are one and the same. And we are here to request $77,536 for the preservation and rehabilitation of the first and second floor of the Perkins Building. Phase 1 has already been funded, and I come here directly from meeting with a steel contractor who's putting in the shelving for the third floor. So it's happening. It's wonderful. The building is from 1808, the Perkins Printing and Engraving Plant. It's colloquially referred to as the Perkins Mint in the community. With appropriate storage systems, climate controls, and security, the building will allow the precious archived manuscript and photograph collections of the Museum of Old Newbury to be preserved for the betterment of the community. And I'll call your attention to the slide. This is the plan for the first floor, which I inadvertently omitted from the remainder of the slideshow. So the first floor will have about a third of it with these sliding archive racks. And the only thing that we are, well, not the only thing, it's a big thing, but what we are requesting funding for is the actual shelving. There's precedent for that in the CPC guidelines for providing shelving to preserve documents. But that is the floor plan of the first floor. You can see the racks with a little sort of welcome space. And then that's the sort of, the way it won't look anything like that, because our building's beautiful, made of brick, but you get the idea. Okay, next. So this is where you will find out that Chantal is my very favorite part of school at all times. The Museum of Old Newbury has an extraordinary collection, and one of the key features of our collection is that documents, photographs, furniture, objects all work together to tell really complex stories. I did not choose the fire. I did not choose the fire slides just for you, but just to give you one little example, we have photographs, paintings, objects, and ephemera pertaining to firefighting, the Great Fire, hand tub musters, insurance and claims records for both fire and ship insurance companies, and handbooks and membership materials for Newburyport's numerous fire societies. So we can tell a really full story over time with documents and artifacts. Next, please. We also have we have 4 of the earliest landscape photographs in the country. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say they are the earliest landscape photographs in the country. One of them is of Chuck Griffin's house here on the left-hand side. This is the jail, the old jail. This was taken in 1839. So, mere moments after Daguerre had developed the Daguerre type. We own these, we have the originals. But in addition to the photographs, we also have his notes, we have his journals. We know from this that one of his earliest memories was watching the original Wolf Tavern burn in the fire of 1811. There's an incredible richness of story, and it depends on these multiple layers of artifacts. Next, please. Now I'm just showing off. We have wonderful, this is one of the earliest drawings of the harbor by a 16-year-old young man. Just another incredible resource. Next. I think we skipped one. That's okay. I'm just showing off my good stuff. We have the original plan for the division of common pasture. So we also go into Old Newbury. This is the division of the common pasture at Old Hill. And then on the left, we have 3 of the shipping journals of a Newburyport sea captain who was swept overboard during his first full command voyage and died 2 days out of port. What we know from these journals is that his wife was on board and they hauled her 5 months to Calcutta and then sent her back with another Newburyport captain. It's an incredible story. All these stories exist nowhere but in our collection. Next. We also have some really wonderfully, this is actually probably my favorite artifact. This is a diary from a very ordinary sort of person in 1950. She's an extraordinary person, but she writes about ordinary things. This is Mary Alice Erkalian's diary from 1950, which again came into the collection fairly recently. She was she writes about visiting, nuns visiting her house. She writes about her friends being sick and visiting family. It's very sort of ordinary life, but of course, we all know her legacy has done extraordinary things in this community. So we have this, wonderfully personal record of her life. All right, next. So currently our archive is housed in a very well organized, but absolutely stuffed to the rafters room on the third floor that is not adequately climate controlled. So you can, this is a different kind of show and tell. You can go to the next slide. These are some more, it's spilled out into the hallway, into another room on the third floor. Go ahead. Again, this is a third room on the third floor. So this is not, anytime you want to get into any of these lower boxes, it's not possible to access any of this material without moving materials to get to them, which of course is inherently dangerous. And potentially damaging, even though we do our best to house them as best we can. Go ahead. So that is the archival material that will be going in that first floor that you saw with the moving kiosks. The second floor houses our library. As you can see, it's archival material is also spilled over here. Go ahead. This is the plan for the second floor. So it is a modest research library with shelves that allow for natural light, which we have UV protection on those windows, and then carousels, which will also allow for some sort of exhibition space on the top of those. So there will be a little bit of material that can be exhibited as well. Next, please. This is a small portion of our journals, and these are business journals, ship logs, all sorts of ledgers. And that may look great. I threw in some silver candlesticks for decoration, but that's actually not the correct way to store those books. It's too much light. They shouldn't be standing on their spines. So we have ways to go with that as well. Next. In case you are not aware of where the Perkins building is, I think most of you have been there, but it is in the rear of the property. The arrows enter next to the Cushing House Museum behind the carriage barn. And we have widened and flattened the access paths, so it is much more accessible than it's ever been before. Next, please. So the Perkins building, again, on the rear of our property, is itself a very important historic building, and the use of it for a community, as a community resource, I think is very important. It's been preserved, but it hasn't been utilized. It hasn't really been able to be utilized for a variety of reasons since it was restored and preserved between, around 2015 to 2017. All right, next. So the phase one project, again, it's the movable rack storage, which is for artwork and flat files. For maps and other documents, but very, very exciting. Right now, our paintings are all stacked in the only room on the third floor. It doesn't have archival materials in it. Next, please. So the phase two scope of work, as you can see, it's $116,000 project. We are asking for the $77,536, which is for the shelving units, the actual, this is, the museum quality standard of care for archives and archival materials. So our museum funds will cover the rest of it. I think it's good for us to have some real skin in the game as well. Although you're welcome to give us more if you'd like to.
Will it solve the problem?
Pardon me?
Will it solve the problem?
It will. There's actually more capacity. It's amazing because when you get compact storage, obviously, it can take all that and it's like packing a suitcase. It will put everything in there. We actually have about 30% of additional capacity.
You'll have to sit on it like squeeze it.
I will not do that now. I promise.
Then will that third floor be open for presentations? once this material moves out?
I don't believe that the third floor will ever be open for presentations. It's pretty inaccessible. It's difficult to get up there. It's not climate controlled. So what I could imagine happening, we're working on seeing if we can do some climate control, some, a climate control mitigation up there that would make it appropriate for hard object storage like silver and porcelain, pottery, things like that. So I think it will probably be storage, but it will allow that second floor library space to be open to the public, which is much more available and accessible. We actually have 3 other museum rooms on that floor. And, it's also, this is a residential house, so the weight of those books in that property is also a concern. Is that my last slide? I think it is.
Bethany, question,
Yes.
when we, were looking at phase one.
Yes.
And you had, some engineering evaluation of loads and whether the structure of the Perkins can handle the loads. And did that include evaluating whether it can take phase two?
Absolutely.
Okay,
So we had an engineering study done by John O'Connell, who then passed away. So we had the engineering study redone by Dan Gelinas. I would say his last name wrong, it's embarrassing, but who was actually the original engineer who stabilized this building in 2017. And so at that point, we had all the weight loads for all 3 floors. Unfortunately, the heaviest load is going on the 3rd floor because it's the floor that we want least accessible by the public. It's where all the artwork is going, and it won't be staffed. So 2nd floor, it will be on camera. But anyway, long story short, that was the only real place to put that. So the entire building was studied, and there have been reinforcements made to existing structural elements. But it was so thoroughly reinforced in 2017 that it was fairly straightforward.
so you don't need additional reinforcement for phase two?
No, we don't. No, it's all happening for phase 1.
Okay,
There have been some places where joists have been sistered. There have been some places where, brick has needed to be repaired. Concrete floor has been actually reinforced, so, but no, the lion's share of that is being done in phase 1.
good, thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Any questions from the public?
Yeah, Connie Preston.
Connie, question?
Yeah, hi, thank you very much. Connie Preston, 18 Atwood Street. Bethany, thank you so much for an entertaining presentation as always. Unfortunately, I did not have the benefit of being able to see the slides, but we have been very supportive of the Museum of Old Newbury, the city of Newburyport for a while. And, I fully support this, but I guess my question would be, obviously the goal of the museum is to continue to acquire more works. Do you have the capacity, I guess the excess capacity in the Perkins Mint to be able to truly fulfill the museum's needs? And if not, where would you go from here?
Thank you. That is an excellent question. There's about 30% additional capacity once we're in the Mint, once we're in the Perkins building, which is probably not going to be enough forever. There may be an offsite storage solution. There may also be technological solutions that we are not considering at the moment. There can be scanning that can be done that is of high quality enough that some photography collections, for example, could be moved into permanent offsite storage. But at the moment, we're planning for the next 5 to 10 years with 30% capacity to grow. So I think, again, in lieu of trying to make a major purchase of an additional building, that's the best solution, given our current resources.
Thank you. I mean, again, I, as a representative of the city, want to be very supportive of the Moon and make sure, we're fulfilling your needs. But I think it's important to understand the horizon as well. Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the public? And one last pass for the committee? None? Okay, thank you, Bethany.
Thank you.
Next, we have the rehabilitation of the firefighters memorial. Request from the Newburyport Fire Department, in the amount of $65,000.
Thanks for having us. I'm Chief Bradbury from the Fire Department. So this is request if you're familiar with, obviously with Oak Hill Cemetery, we're talking the rear entrance of Parker Street. The first thing you see is the Fireman's Memorial. The lots are owned by the Sick Benefit Association. Probably might be in Kenny's presentation. That's probably been around since the late 1800s, early 1900s. But this is firefighter Ken Parseghian. He's put the program together.
Evening, thank you for having us and for hearing us out. We've gone through a couple meetings already with Oak Hill Cemetery to get their approval of this project and to the Historic Commission in town. And so we made some updates since that last meeting to kind of, vet people's concerns and to move forward with the project. So as the chief said, when you first go down to Parker Street, to the backside of Oak Hill Cemetery, the first thing that you see is the memorial here. This is the entire plot from here to here and the tree line in the back. We actually own this plot. So if we go to the next slide. So this is the memorial that we have. We have members, some very recent that have been added. Tony Raven and Brett Birkinshaw, both active duty firefighting deaths, along with several from the past, and we don't ever want to forget those people. We go down, for those of you who don't know, we go down once a year, every year, to do a service in June, for Sunday, Chief? Second Sunday in June. And it's Fireman's Memorial Sunday, which has been adopted by the state as like an official holiday through the state. So that's what this memorial is, in part to that and to honor our sacrifices from our fallen. So if we go to the next slide. So the project summary is just to rehabilitate the memorial. On the front of it, we have a problem that the land sits higher than the driveway of the cemetery, and it's been slowly eroding away over the years. And it's been kind of inaccessible for people to really get to the monument, other than those short little front steps there. So our hope is to be able to put a retaining wall around the front of that to stop that erosion problem and add some, curb appeal to it in general, as it is the first site that you see when you go into the Oak Hill Cemetery. Very recently with the Historic Commission, they were able to vote it in as, because Oak Hill Cemetery is a historic site, they deemed that the monument has historic significance to the city of Newburyport and to the cemetery. So that kind of, helped their cause a bit, I believe, for the importance of this site. So part of the project is we want to try to create an ADA accessible ramp, because again, the only access is the two front stairs. And this was one of the issues with the last committee meeting. The original concept drawing didn't have any sort of ramp to really give it full access. We went back to the drawing board with Mara Robinson, who has donated her time to do the conceptual drawings. And Vern from Visionary Landscapes, who's also done work at the Newbury Museum. So he does great work. And we went back to the drawing board a little bit, and things came in a little over budget, but he's willing to kind of give us a hand with that. But we're able to put a ramp in there that we feel will meet this criteria. And then we want to update the surrounding landscape. The greenery and stuff is just, if anybody landscapes or, after 30, 40 years, they start to outgrow themselves, they need to be redone, and that's where we're at with the landscape down there, so we wanna kind of update that as well. So if we go to the next slide. So this is the new updated conceptual drawing. So the front steps that were located here, that you saw in the first picture, would be moved to back to the monument. So actually increase the front side of the monument, which would actually help us as well for our service, because we lay a wreath out front every year. But then it would allow us to make that front walkway ADA accessible by making it just a, transition right from the hot top. So that was the new conceptual drawing. We updated, did a little less shrubbery, because there was concern that there was too much shrubbery and how it would get watered. So we tweaked that a little bit from the original drawing, which is, if you actually go into our file, the original concept drawing is in there as well. The other thing that we changed was the walkway was gonna be more of a larger round walkway. We narrowed it to a straight walkway to the monument from the front. And that's partially because we do have some members that have some plaques, because there's a couple members that have been laid to rest there with their urns and whatnot. So we had to kind of adjust that so that we don't disturb any of that that's going on there. If we go to the next slide. So the public benefit of this obviously is to help us preserve the history of Newburyport Fire and the sacrifices that the members have made. Showing our community support towards that. And then, like I said, to create better visibility and accessibility, as you go by, visually it'll be enticing for people, might draw people into this, nationally recognized cemetery, and also just, give us better access for it. Next slide. So this is the 1978, acts and results. This is what I was speaking on as far as Fireman's Memorial Sunday. So this is a document from the State House when this was kind of made a official holiday around the state. Next slide. And this is just a copy of the lot and site that the sick benefit was able to purchase from the cemetery back in 1946. So this goes back quite a ways.
Yeah, that's not the original location. The original location was the cemetery, Old Hill. It was moved right around that time period from there to this location.
To the location that you own.
Yes,
Yes.
you not own the other one.
Yeah.
The city wanted to expand the Highland Cemetery, Highview Cemetery.
Right.
We were right there.
Okay.
Next slide, please. So this is just a copy of the letter from the recent Oak Hill meeting. It had a few conditions listed in there. Some of them we've already met with the new conceptual drawing, and some of the others is just the way the work would be done, which is not an issue, just a matter of organizing with the contractor. The next slide, please. And this is the very well-written letter from the Historic Commission that we greatly appreciated. Again, stating that it's a site of historic significance now. So it was a very nice endorsement that we got from them, and we appreciate that. Next slide. So project timeline, we have the conceptual design in place. We've made some adjustments to it, thanks to Mara Robinson. She donated all her time for this project. I reached out about a couple of years ago on Facebook if anybody would be interested, and she graciously stepped right up without hesitation. So we are greatly appreciative of her for that. So we have one estimate from a contractor. His name's Vern with Visionary Landscapes. Like I said, he's done some work at other historical properties around town, so we know he's qualified and does great craftsmanship. His bid, this with these latest renditions of, making everything handicapped accessible, came in about $80,000. I told him that we were asking for 65,000, and he basically said that he would, just to make sure that we have everything, T's crossed, I's dotted and so forth. and the work would be able to start after this year's memorial service. Obviously, we don't want to have it all torn up for the June service. And again, it would fall in conjunction with, the ability of the contractors and around the cemetery's needs as far as funerals and whatnot, so that we don't disturb anything going on there. Next slide. And that's it. So again, I'm Ken Parskin, for the president of the Sick Benefit Association, have been for a few years, and we've been kicking this idea around for a number of years. We don't have funding of our own to do this, which is why we're coming to you. Being, you know, that we're a city organization, it's tough to have private funding.
This is just like to add, this is, we do, the Sick Benefit Association, there are 8 lots there, this is an active plot, we just buried somebody there. He died in Florida, the fire department paid for his remains to come up, and we just placed them there, this past spring at our ceremony. We have one chief that was buried there in the 50s, Chief Frank Reed. So it is an active, lot that hasn't had any work done to it that I can ever remember, probably since the 40s. You know, this ceremony that we do every June, we get pictures from at least the 30s, so it could be even older than that, so it's really important to us.
I'd like to pass on a couple of questions from our committee member,
Sure.
Jane Healy, who's attending by Zoom. The communication you had with the contractor that originally had the 65,000 number, now it's an 80 number, but he says he'll do 65. How recent is that communication?
So the recent communication, so this past 2 weeks, they've
Okay.
been at the drawing board doing the rendition since we met with the historic commission
Okay,
to try to, because the original drawing, which is in our pamphlet, the steps were still up front and there was no ramp. And after meeting with them, the question was posed, well, is there any way to make this more handicapped accessible? So they went back to the drawing board in these past 2 weeks. And so that, there's an original budget from a few years ago that was 65,000.
Right.
He updated it more recently to the, projected, cost of living was up to 80,000. We made some changes, and even with the new changes, because we pulled out electric, but then we had to add some stuff. Was gonna be 80,000 again, and then it was literally, this past 2 days that they redid the budget, and, he priced everything out and said it would be this, but he'd be willing to do it for the 65,000,
okay.
with what the project is.
So what the scope of the work that you're showing him right now?
Yeah.
The updated scope.
That's
Okay.
correct.
Okay. The funds, if a grant is recommended to city council, by the time it works through city council, generally you don't actually have access to the funds until fall.
Okay.
Would that fit into your time frame?
Yeah, I would obviously have to talk to the contractor, but usually, with hardscapes, they can, kind of get going depending on when the funds come. If not, then we could get started right away the following spring,
Yeah.
as soon as the weather breaks. So depending on how the weather works in the fall, and his schedule. But I know, speaking to him this past week, he is, willing to put it right into his schedule so that we can make it work when we're ready.
Okay. I noticed that you're gonna double check the numbers with other estimates. If your scope changes or you're gonna go with another contractor with a different number, just update your application for us.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And finally, Jane's question is, could you consider plantings that are site-specific and drought-tolerant? So to minimize your maintenance.
The maintenance, so, and that was part of the reason, so again, in the original concepting, we had a lot more plantings that were in there. I also do landscaping on the side, so a lot of these plants, once they're established after the first year, Mother Nature will take care of them. It won't be too much of an issue. It's on the downside slope of the cemetery, so it also gets a lot of water drain off
Mhm.
that way, so the ground, the lawn, we've never had an issue with the lawn drying up and burning up even in drought seasons, so it is a pretty good lot there.
Okay. Any other members of the committee have questions?
I said it.
Yes.
I just wanted to, I think I was on the, brought up in the local commission about the grant, and I really thank you for investing time in that, because I think it does make a difference as far as like the public benefit for it. And
Yeah,
I
and,
think it actually looks nicer now.
I have to say, I have to agree with you, it wasn't something we really considered moving the stairs out of place. And that was something that Mara and Vern came up with. And by keeping the historic aspect of it, pushing them back to the monument, so we don't just eliminate it. Because the front of the stairs, I think, does say, firemen on it. So it would, save that, and I think it really did change the outlook of it, and, made it very more appealing.
We do have a significant amount of handicapped people that come to that.
Yes.
ceremony, too.
A lot of family and a lot of retirees go down quite often.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for your presentation. Very
Thank you.
nice. The budget includes that granite, that wall?
Yes, that 65,000 includes
Those
so
two
the
half-
wall is actually, New England field stone with
Oh.
a bluestone cap, and that's all included in there, the brickwork. The only thing that's there now is this stone piece here and this stone piece here. This stone piece is actually located right here, right now, as the steps, and they'll take the time to move them back so that we don't just, basically reuse them.
How high is it off the ground on the inside? Is that a foot and a half, 2 feet?
So, this here, I'm not sure of the exact height, I think it's about 2 feet, depending on the erosion.
On the low side, but on the
yeah.
upper,
And what they said, which the concept drawing doesn't really show, is that there would probably be a little bit of granite going here that would kind of hold back the dirt here in the, where it's actually ramped off.
I just asked because you can use it, it's designed to be a seat.
It's not designed to be, but it's certainly, like any other place that we go, if there's a seat to be had, people will certainly make use of it. During our ceremonies that we have every year, we lay a wreath here, all the active duty firemen stand on either side, and the chief and, the reverend that we have will usually do the presentation from here, and the audience is out front, during our ceremony.
Very nice.
And in recent years, the ceremony attendance has probably reached well over 150 people in recent years.
More if we have breakfast.
Yeah, more. If we have breakfast. If we offer breakfast, we're over 200.
Well, I think a seat will be helpful.
That's it.
Yeah, okay. Any other questions from the committee? Any questions from the public?
We did. We have Connie
Yeah,
Preston.
hi, Connie Preston, 18 Atwood Street. Super quick. So firstly, much appreciation to Mr. Presigian and Chief Bradbury for being there. And I apologize if this question is obvious in the presentation, but I don't have the benefit of seeing it. How many plots total are in the parcel that the fire department owns? And how many of them are currently occupied?
So there are 8 plots down there, and 2 are currently occupied.
Okay, right.
And we've actually talked about that, our next annual meeting, which we had just had one in January. So this has come up since then, that we might make a motion that all future burials will be cremation, so that it's not disturbing any of the project or the land. Which is what the most recent burial was, a cremation as well. It's kind of more with the times of what things are doing.
Yeah,
Fully understood.
Connie's Chief Bradbury is kind of limited. We don't have a lot of people knocking on the door to be buried there because you can't bring your spouse.
Yeah. And I fully appreciate that, but I also fully appreciate the desire to continue to have the opportunity should someone want to be there, but also a space for the memorial exhibitions that you guys do, and I have attended them, and they really are fantastic. So, I think whether or not someone is actually buried there, the point is to have a space of remembrance, and that's what's so very important, right? And then my other question would just be around, the electrical, and again, not having the benefit of the presentation itself. And I apologize, I was coming from another meeting and didn't have the benefit of time to get there in person. But, so how important is the lighting to this? And I guess offset by how expensive is the electricity run to have that lighting?
So the electrical was actually so there is a section in the most recent budget, a line item for the conduit and whatnot. But we actually eliminated the electric, because there's no electric in the cemetery currently. So it would have to be metered from the pole. And unfortunately, the city just redid the rail trail there, and the cemetery itself, the first section of driveway that you go in and up around either side of our memorial was recently done. So both parties are not willing to have that dug up after just being recently redone. So we are going to, at this time, not do run electrical, but we are gonna look at maybe doing some solar options. This day and age with technology ever changing, you can really get some nice spotlights on, with small solar.
All right, thank you. I mean, that's sort of the root of my question was, given all of the new asphalt that's being laid and needing to disturb that, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much.
Okay,
Thank you.
any further questions from the public? Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Okay, next, we will hear from about the Atkinson Common Rock Tower Restoration, City of Newburyport Parks Commission and Division, $128,700.
Thank you. I'm here representing the Parks Commission and Division. I'm excited to give you both an update of where we stand from last year's approval for funding for phase 1, as well as request funding for phase 2 of the Atkinson Common Rock Tower Restoration Project. Next slide, please. For those who were not here last year, just I promise, very, very brief overview of the history here. So the land that the Atkinson Common sits on was actually donated in 1873 by Eunice Atkinson Currier to the city of Newburyport. A lot of people don't realize that the Belleville Improvement Society, which is the nonprofit that is in charge of sort of overseeing the park, was established in 1894, and they still exist today, and they are still advocating for its protection. They were responsible for laying out the paths and plantings that created the park as we see it today. It is not only a historic park, but it is our Victorian, very formal, the only formal park in the city that is owned by the city. In 1917, a local merchant named William Swayze donated a wooden platform observation deck, which actually is not in the location of the tower where it is today. It was off to the side where the Pine Alley exists today. Because it was made out of wood, it very rapidly declined. And then in 1931, Fred Nealon, who was a local administrator of President Hoover's Emergency Relief and Construction Act, started plans to replace the tower to where we see it today. Next slide. So this slide on the right is how we see the park today. So the tower was actually located at the northeast end of the central axis that runs through the center of the park. And so if you're standing at the soldier statue, which is at the road, you the executive order establishing the WPA, and that's when work on this tower began. Again, the Belleville Improvement Society provided all of the materials to build the tower, and the ERA provided the labor. It was completed in 1936, and the total cost was $40,000. Next slide, please. Fast forward about 80 years, and not a lot of maintenance was done on the tower. The unfortunate situation here is that it is exposed to the elements. There's no glazing in any of the openings for the windows, and the doorways were also an open grate, and there's no roof. So water penetrated it over a number of years, and it caused a slow decline. This picture on the right is what it looked like about 5 years ago. The stairs had been completely rotted out. Obviously, the trees are obscuring the view to it, and there is no plaque commemorating the history. So most residents of Newburyport didn't know it was in a WPA project. They still don't know it's a WPA project. So it's sort of, history has been shrouded. The gates and windows were welded shut and barricaded because of vandal activity. Next slide, please. About 3 or 4 years ago, the Belleville Improvement Society really began a project, grassroots project, to try to start the restoration of the Atkinson Tower. They removed the stairway completely, and they replaced it with this very temporary pressure-treated wood stair. And the purpose of that was to allow contractors and inspectors access to each of the levels to try to assess what needed to be done, and also have access during construction. Steel beams were installed throughout the tower to increase the loading capacity at each floor. And on the exterior, the base stones there's a bumped out base along the bottom was cleaned and repointed. They did do some concrete reinforcement, but it certainly wasn't enough to restore the entire tower. Next slide, please. Last year, with a gracious allocation from this body, the CPC, we used just shy of $60,000. The floors and ceilings were repaired, and they were coated with an epoxy sealer, which you can see in this picture to the right. Scupper drains were installed at each level to prevent water pooling and freezing. But again, water really is our enemy here, and it is continuing to cause rapid deterioration of the tower. Next slide, please. Those of you who were here last year see that we have 5 phases of work. This really hasn't changed much from last year. We did reconfigure where some of the work is being done in phases 2 through 5, but phase 1, which was to repair the concrete and coat it with an epoxy sealer, has been entirely completed. Phase 2, we have taken out a little bit of the scope and sort of pared down phase 2 to include just the cleaning and repointing of the entire remaining exterior masonry, which will require a lift. And we have a cost estimate, recent cost estimate of $128,700, which includes a contingency. Phases 3, 4, and 5 have gone up in price, not surprisingly. I will say that we are working with a local architectural historian who has donated her time to get this structure listed on the National Register. And so we are really hoping that that will open up some opportunities for other grants to try to cover some of these future phases. But overall, it's a hefty dollar amount for the restoration of this, what we think is a very important piece of our history. Next slide. I won't go too much into detail of this. I think you understand from last year the public benefit here. It really is in line with the mission of the CPC, we believe, by by preserving Newburyport's defining scenic heritage landscapes. And I will note on the providing a range of active and passive recreational opportunities. The Parks Commission is really still trying to define what those will be in the future. It is their hope that we will be able to open up the tower again to public access. They are working with the somewhat newly formed Port Parks Alliance to try to come up with different ideas for events, whether that be weddings, wine tastings, galleries, just fundraisers, or just maybe a Saturday afternoon access to the tower every month or so. But that is their goal here. And again, this really is protecting Newburyport's builds and historic structures and spaces. Next slide, please. Those who are not familiar with the Atkinson Common, which I think all of us probably are, you can see from an aerial view how that central spine really does define the entire, character of this Victorian park. So you've got the volunteer statue, which is the soldier statue in the front there at the bottom. And then that central axis that crosses over the little pond, you have the left midway through, and then the tower, and you can actually see the trees there and how they are obstructing the view from Mosley Avenue and 113. Next slide, please. Actually, that's it. So that's
For the cost. Is having only a single estimate a function of the specialized work involved here? And
it is a function of the specialized work. We will be getting more quotes. It was also just the pressures of time at the
Sure.
time. We did reach out to others that didn't have time to put an estimate together for us, but we will obviously be doing that and putting this out to formal bid because it is a public property. So
Right.
the Mass General allows me to do that.
Okay,
Yes.
okay. Have any idea what the if money were not an issue, can each phase stand alone? In other words, the phase does not get deteriorated if there's a delay to phase 3 or phase 4.
Yeah, I mean, that is why we actually moved for phase 3. We really need some sort of enclosure over the top of the building, and that is gonna be a very delicate endeavor because we obviously don't want to in any way shroud the character of the tower. But in order to preserve this in actuality, we need to prevent water penetration. So yeah, I think my guess is over the course of the next year, we'll be working pretty diligently with trying to come up with a solution for some kind of roof enclosure. Which I think will protect, it will help
Certainly.
halt deterioration. Yes.
Any questions from the committee? Yes.
At what point would you be able to open it up to the public?
The stair needs to meet code, and right now it does not.
So you're talking about the internal stairs?
There was a spiral stair. in
Right.
there.
It was
So there would be no way to just kind of open up that little first level there. I think it'd be great if people could like say, oh, there's work going on here. Might build some support,
Yeah, it's possible.
Any other questions? Yes.
Would the roof, is that meant to be kind of a temporary enclosure or?
No, I think the effective structure, luckily, we have 2 architects on the Parks Commission who, one of which who is the liaison to the Atkinson Common, and he's on the Belleville Improvement Society, who has done some renderings of different ideas. Nothing has seemed to really hit the right marks yet, but he's working through some options.
I was just trying to picture how that would work with still allowing access up there, but not changing the the shape of it or the,
Right.
And the trees, as far as I've photographed it and stuff, it's like, you can't really even see like to the river,
No.
really out of there, even if you were up there, so basically be seeing right down in the park,
You can see the park very clearly from up there, even with the trees immediately adjacent to the tower.
Especially towards the field.
Right, but you really can't.
Yeah.
I was up there today, actually, with the historian who was doing this registry for us, and even now with no leaves on the trees, you still can't see the river.
Other questions? Any members of the public have questions?
Preston?
Connie?
Yeah, hi,
Right.
sorry, I promise I'm not here to ask a question on everything, so I'll be super quick. Connie Preston, 18 Atwood Street. So as someone who has paid to, I don't know, maybe have my name on a step in the Belleville Tower at some point in the world, are they still fundraising as a Belleville Society, or is that over?
I don't believe they are actively fundraising right now. I think they're trying to get their arms around what the full scope and cost of this will be, and then potentially we'll either work with the Port Parks Alliance or do some fundraising on their own. They
Okay,
haven't
thank you.
done fundraising in a while.
Thanks.
It was part of phase one that their fundraising supported.
Right,
Is
so
that
the work
correct? Yeah.
5 years ago
Yeah,
was
yeah.
was paid for by the BIS.
That's what I thought, yeah,
Mhm.
okay. Any other questions? Committee, public? No? Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Next, we have the FEMA Hazard Mitigation Program Plum Island Property Acquisition in the city of Newburyport, $395,027.
Hi, I'm Julia Godfreyson. I know some of you already. I'm the Conservation Administrator for the city of Newburyport, and I'm here representing the city in its request for funding under the Community Preservation Act for this hazard mitigation grant program, Plum Island Property Acquisition Project. The total of which you said is $395,028. So switch to the next slide. This is the project location. The purchase would be of 3 properties on Plum Island, on the northern point of Plum Island. It's 975th Street, 1275th Street, and 1573rd Street. And just to give you a little background, brief history, Plum Island obviously is our barrier beach. It's critically important natural resource that protects, as all barrier beaches do, protect a mainland from the full force and effect of, in this case, the Atlantic Ocean. It also provides critical habitat for endangered species, birds, both birds and plants. You can just, I'm not right, well, you can just go to this one. Actually, if you could go back, yeah, perfect. The project area is shown on here. It's hard to see because I gave that, but this is the general project area. And so as a barrier beach, it is affected by waves and wind and currents from both the river and the ocean, and barrier beaches shift and change over time as a natural process. But in this particular location, as you can see, in 2014 and 2018, there's been a really dramatic change. That's about 500 feet of loss of dune. Since around 2012, 2014, when the Army Corps of Engineers completed repair of the South Jetty. Remember, they also did the North Jetty. And when that happened, it changed dramatically the currents within the mouth of the river. Is called a gyre, which is that has just proceeded to scoop out sand from that particular location on the island. So now you can go to the next slide. That's actually something that UNH put together, which shows a change in the loss of dune in less than a year, from October 2016 to April 2017. You can see that much was lost. But even at that point in 2017, there was still some healthy vegetative dune left in that location in front of those houses. And the city was doing a lot of work, putting sand on the beach, chlor bags and things like that to try and protect the dune from being lost any further. Now you can go to the next slide. And that's 2021. And you can see here, it's hard to tell, but these white areas, actually, it's a combination of the ocean or the mouth of the river, but also sandbags that the city had placed, which then fell down, and the concrete blocks, which you can see are just all being pulled out, and along with the strongly vegetated dune. And this is 1275th Street right there. That's one of the properties that's subject of this acquisition project. You can go to the next slide. Because of the situation that we were in 2021, the city worked closely with Department of Conservation and Recreation
and GZA Environmental Consultants to put together a very highly engineered shoreline protection project that involved construction of extensive, we call them coir envelopes, which is those coconut fiber rolls filled with sand, extremely heavy, staked with, piled on top of each other and staked with wood stakes into the dune, actually into the beach at that point, to try and create a fortification of that toe of the dunes to prevent any further loss and damage to the homes. One of the homes of which at that point was already condemned along that street, that which is Reservation Terrace, and it was also jeopardizing city infrastructure in that location and et cetera. So you could go to the next slide. That is a photo of what those quarterbacks look like. And you can see they were initially covered with sand. In this case, at this time, the sand was already sort of getting pulled away off the top of them. And the water was coming right over them. You go to the next slide, and this is what it looked like in 2022. And so you can't even see the quarterbacks here anymore. This is Reservation Terrace, and that's 1275th Street, and this is the water. This is just, it's coming right up the street. So, that put us in a position of needing something more than just core bags, and that is around when the Army Corps of Engineers dredged the Merrimack River and and you can go to the next slide, I think it shows, well, that's just the project location. So these are the three properties that are subject to this application. This is 1275th, that's what you've been seeing the photos of. This is 975th Street right here. Property goes like this. This is a vacant lot, and this is 1273rd Street. This is the house that was condemned. And right around that same time, the Army Corps of Engineers was planning to dredge the Merrimack River. And so through a long process that took years of advanced planning, we were able to get them to put all the sand from the dredge of the river onto the beach at Reservation Terrace to restore this whole dune. So you could go to the next slide and you can see what that looks like. So this is the area again. They put about 215 cubic yards of sand from the Merrimack onto the beach here, which created about 13 acres of new beach, which looked fabulous. If anyone had been out there and saw that, it looks like a whole new place. And now you can go to the next slide, and that's what it looks like today. So the water's right back up over that new area. And again, that's a picture of 1275th Street, which thankfully is up on piling. So back in, I should have backed up, back in around 2022, before the dredge took place, we received a call from Mass Emergency Management Agency letting us know that there was an opportunity, a special opportunity under FEMA's Hazard Mitigation Grant Program for property acquisition, which is always every year they have this program, but this particular year in 2022, 2023, there was more, not only was there more money available for the grant program nationwide, but they also reduced the match amount so that the federal government would pay 90% of the share of a property acquisition project, and the municipality or the local government would only have to pay 10% rather than the typical 75 and 25%. So they said, not only is there all this money, but the match is much smaller. We know the kind of situation that Newburyport is in right now. If you want to, if there are any interested parties on Plum Island who want to take advantage of this program, this would be the time to do it. All sort of the stars were aligned. We put it out to the community who wanted to participate in this program. It's a voluntary property acquisition program. The homeowners have to volunteer for, and then the city would apply on their behalf through NEMA to FEMA for this grant. And so these three homeowners said, yes, we want to participate in the program. Please include us. We put together the application with the help of GZA. It was very technical, a very technical benefit cost analysis has to be prepared using special FEMA software. That was all submitted to FEMA. And now it looks as though we may actually receive
grant, where the federal government would pay, approximately 3.9 million, and we would pay 395,000. Acquire these 3 properties, and then what would happen is the structures would be demolished. The properties would be returned to natural dunes, on beach, open space, planted with dune grass, and hopefully, establish a safer zone. And it would be permanent city beachfront properties. You can go to the next slide. That's just the project budget. Again, there's a lot of detail in that budget that I'm happy to go over with you if you're interested.
Is this the same budget that's in the written?
It's the exact same
Okay.
budget. Yep, it's the same budget. So you've probably already all seen that. And then the next slide. Obviously, it's a very pretty picture. That's sort of a goal for what we may be able to establish on Plum Island. You know, as you know, anyone who's been out there, it's a lot of small lots with small homes and not a lot of public open space, other than the beach itself, which you sometimes can't get to because you can't park or, you know, it's just not as accessible as you would like it. So this would give the city, you know, quite a bit of land right on the beach in a really nice location that hopefully, once the jetties are repaired properly, we will not lose that land. But we'll be able to establish a healthy dune in those locations and have it be an amenity for the city. So
What's the total acreage of the 4 plots and are they adjacent
little
plots?
acreage, they're adjacent. Did I put down as the total acreage? It's not much, but it's something like, it's less than an acre still. It is in the,
In the application?
it's in the application.
Yeah, the properties will total 0.41
Yeah,
acres, so we have,
0.41 acres.
we have less than half an acre.
Yeah.
Okay. How long do you think the, restoration with the new dune grass and everything would last, absent a fix of the,
That is the $1 million question,
mm,
or the $3 million.
I mean, given the sand replenishment and the other efforts that,
Yeah.
that didn't last a year.
Yeah, no, you. The federal delegation and the Army Corps of Engineers to get them to do what's called a 111, section 111 study, which looks at whether or not they were to, the jetty itself is to blame for this erosion problem. They have to do the study. We know that it's the case. They basically know that it's the case. If the study says that is the case through these models that they use, then they can make modifications to the jetty. And those modifications could break up this gyre effect within the mouth of the river, stop this erosion pattern, which really, would be basically just knocking some blocks off of the jetty, creating like a potential, like a weir in the jetty, which is the situation that the jetty was in prior to their fix of it in 2014. Because the last repair to the jetty had been in around 1970. And the same erosion pattern started back then. Blizzard of 78 happened, knocked some blocks off, and we ended up with 15, more acres of sand at the point. So it's, that's, everyone's crossing their fingers. The Army Corps gets to that point sooner rather than later of finishing that study, making that determination and doing some work to the jetty. But we don't know what's gonna come first, sand goes away or the fix gets done. So,
What hazard are we mitigating?
so we're mitigating I guess it would be considered storm damage, flooding, erosion. It's the acquisition of hazard prone homes and businesses is the eligible activity. under the FEMA Hazard Mitigation Grant Program. And, you know, it's essentially taking people out of harm's way and restoring open space, protecting natural resources at the same time.
Are we protecting the infrastructure that's down there, the sewer system, things like that?
Well, there is a, what do you call it, one of those candy cane vents at the end of 75th Street. Essentially, you know, the goal is to move people out of harm's way on Plum Island, if possible. There's really no other way to do that than this without people voluntarily sacrificing their properties. Otherwise, they're just going to try to sell the property to another, you know, owner from somewhere else, who's then gonna be in the same position that they were in. So until we begin turning some of these properties into protected open space, we're gonna continue to have people to protect and rescue and save out there. And we're not going to be protecting the actual resource, which is the dune and the island barrier beach. And the habitat and recreational resources and all those other values. So,
Am I correct that the formula for purchase price on these properties by federal regulation under this program is fair market value without discount for the risk that the property poses?
well, they don't specifically discount for the risks, but what they, in fair market value, they do, I mean, it is the fair market. So that's understanding that with these risks in place.
Right, yeah.
And so that is what they looked at, and it was given, see, they did that work about summer of 2022, when it was really bad out there, before the dredge, so before the sand was placed. That is when the fair market value was established. Yeah, I mean, so we actually hired GZA to do that benefit cost analysis work for the application for us, because it is so detailed and complicated. And they do take into consideration, in addition to the fair market value, in doing the benefit cost analysis, they take things like expenditure of city resources and all the other work that has been done out there by both the state and city, in addition to the FEMA insurance payments and overtime. They also look at the rate of erosion and the threat to these homes and what's the likelihood that they're gonna end up having to essentially own these homes in the future anyway, through just taking them with insurance payments.
And part of the cost is, the calculation is the demolition and disposal
Yes,
and restoration.
yes,
That's all part of the cost.
that's all built in, including permitting as well.
yeah.
Everything is built into this final
Okay.
cost.
Okay. Is any other source of funding for the 10% being sought?
Not that I'm aware of. So this would be the city's obligation if the grant is awarded. And, it can come from, you know, it's not really like we have a selected pot of money for it to come from, but it is an acquisition of open space. And it is in the city's open space plan, does call out Plum Island. It's not, you know, acquisition of land on Plum Island hasn't typically been what the open space fund is used for. But the open space plan does say, historically, Plum Island has been densely developed, primarily with summer cottages. More recent development has seen infill and redevelopment of smaller lots with larger year-round homes. The combination of denser development and intense storm events creates erosion emergencies and the need for beach nourishment and other mitigation measures, such as converting developed land to protected open space. This is on page 57 of the Open Space and Recreation Plan. It also says, providing natural buffers to receptors sensitive to the effects of migrating sediments is another consideration in prioritizing open space protection. And then on page 71, the plan says, under Plum Island, the barrier beach that defines Plum Island is threatened by sea level rise, wave action, and more intense redevelopment. Newburyport would be interested in conserving land as it became available to increase protection to the beach. So it's called out in the Open Space and Recreation Plan, and it does fit squarely within the evaluation criteria under the CPA. So I think that is why the city's looking to this source, for this particular project. It does make sense in those ways. Now, it's very dissimilar to the type of land acquisition that we paid for in the past, but.
Andy's asking.
Andy?
I just wanted to supplement what Juliet offered, because I suspected that that question might come up, what alternatives are, for funding sources. I'd asked Ethan Manning, the finance director, just, are there other sources internally, because of course, there's always questions about outside sources. We'd love to put more money in for outside. This is obviously a high ratio, to pull from the federal government, for this. Proportionally, as Julia mentioned, we're not expecting them to have that same ratio going forward, is what they were conveying to us, right? But the response I got was just that there may be ability to use, what's referred to as a supplemental stabilization fund, which was essentially established because of the water and sewer system out there. Maybe a possible source for that, if, as an alternative, so to speak. But beyond that, I'm not aware of any other sources that would be available that's already been, positive, so to speak.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the committee?
Yes, I guess I'm just gonna show my ignorance, which I admit. Thank you, Joe. Has the city been buying other properties? Is this the first time we're proposing to buy threatened properties on the beach?
The first time that I'm aware of, certainly during my time here, but I'm not aware of anything that we have done or have had to do perhaps, in any recent time. That has come up, so I'm not aware of any others that have happened like that. Some of you may have actually noticed the old Coast Guard facility started to be exposed, the old building foundation right out there. But I don't, and we had, obviously, when I first got here, there was a fair amount of erosion happening at the center. And that was happening in the other town, right, the Newbury town. So that was happening, there was certainly some heavy discussions around that time, but we weren't really experiencing things until the jetty was being repaired. We weren't really seeing that sort of pattern up here at all. Actually, we had a pretty expansive beach, like Julia said, we had a pretty expansive beach before like Julia said, it's pretty obvious, without even the analysis being done by the AI computers, that's related to the jetty. The question is, what is the Army Corps' response to that? What is going to be done? Is it a weir? Is it some other technique in order to address the gyre, which is a separate issue from sea level rise and other things? It's a concentrated erosion spot right now.
And to follow up on that, to just address the question of whether or not this land is gonna stick around. We buy it, or is it gonna still be there? If the Army Corps doesn't fix the jetty in time. Well, we don't know how that's gonna play out in the immediate future, but I would say for sure in the long term, I feel pretty confident, I don't know if Andy feels the same way. I feel pretty confident that we are on the path towards the Army Corps of Engineers addressing this problem with the jetty and fixing this current and fixing this. It's really a man-made erosion pattern right now. So that even if the erosion does continue and cut into these parcels, which would be acquired by the city now, they would be built back up again once this is fixed. Just like the sand goes, it leaves and it comes back, and it leaves and it comes back. My guess is the sand would come right back once that's fixed. And so therefore I do see it as sort of a more permanent acquisition of open space. Not something that would be gone forever.
I'm showing my ignorance because my wife and I lost a place on the other side in Salisbury. And we always thought that if you're on that island, there was no guarantee about that land existing. The house is gone. You hoped you could get all the insurance you could from FEMA. And I think that's an interesting thing, how that's rolled out. But I'm just surprised and a little bit concerned about the extent of the obligation, because there's a lot of valuable property all along that area. We got between ourselves and England, we're trying to hold within it. Wow, that's all I got. I'm just stunned. If I didn't know the city of Newburyport was using its own money, or have they before, to do this? I know we're trying to get other people to spend money.
Well, we haven't used money to purchase properties like this on Plum Island, but we have used city funds to try to protect those properties.
A lot of that stonework was brought in and paid for by the property owners years ago, but I haven't paid attention lately.
There were softer measures put in by the city, like the bar bags and the new grass planting and sand that's more often the city's.
Yeah. and the state, and there's all public money. In different pots at different times. But in terms of Plum Island, and barrier beaches in general functioning, you're right, they do tend to sort of like migrate inland over time, but it actually, there's been a study done on Plum Island in particular, and it's because it's very stable, as barrier beaches go, Plum Island is actually very stable, in terms of lasting over time and not moving at the same rate that other barrier islands move because of the amount of sediment that comes out of the Merrimack River, because of the force of that and the amount of it coming down from New Hampshire is so much sediment that it's a constant supply back onto the beach. Once it goes out into the system, it comes back onto the beach more so than it really any other barrier beach on the East Coast. So, I mean, that does bode well for long term.
Thank you.
Has the Army Corps of Engineers given you, do you have any sort of timeline for when they'll finish this analysis, or did you know what that is?
They do hope to finish this modeling analysis, this spring, that would show, whether it would essentially show whether or not a weir in the jetty would fix the problem.
Yeah, sorry, I was gonna add, they basically this spring, we're expecting to get their final analysis and some idea of which options, you know, they think were sort of what would work best, essentially, to sort of, you know, explain that to us. Based on, you know, the computer running a bunch of different, you know, scenarios out there, right? It's kind of doing a bunch of analysis that humans can't possibly do fast enough, so. I think the question about timing has more to do with whether or not if that's the solution, like, in my view, it's like you go out there and just pull a couple boulders and you start to see that, you know. And in my mind, it's sort of difficult because I started to think like, that's a really simple task, just get some boulders out of there and we can, you know. But in reality, what we don't know is, and this is part of the ongoing discussions that we typically have at the MRBA meetings, Merrimack River Beach Alliance, you know, Pitt Hall, the constant dialogue about how long it takes to do, whether it's design or something, or whether it's actual construction funding, and sometimes those things happen in series, they don't happen simultaneous. So, not that I think moving a couple of boulders out of there is a significant cost, generally speaking by itself, but you know, you're gonna bring these out there, you're gonna do that, and it has to be mobilized with the federal government. There is some pressure and anxiety at the MRBA meetings, you know, to ask for those things to be done in a timely way, because we've been waiting for this analysis to come back and presumably say, yes, the jetty is causing this hotspot erosion, something needs to be done, here's a potential solution to it, whatever that's going to be. And then the question is, how quickly is that going to be done? I don't know that we have an answer for that yet, so.
Yeah.
Thank you both.
Question?
Yeah, just real quick, it feels opportunistic, you know, there's a grant, we put 10%, you know, that it also feels like it's a good deal, you know, you put 10% down, you get 4 million. I didn't see it in the mayor's letter, for proposals to support. Is that because it's not part of any Plum Island strategy, mitigation strategy, or is it just there's a grant available, they let us know if we give them 400 grand, they'll give us?
My understanding is like the mayor tried to put emphasis on projects that he thought were very important. Not to say that this isn't, but just that I think he was just trying to put an exclamation mark, you know, or emphasis asterisk on those projects. I don't think it was necessarily to diminish any other project per se. And we don't have like a city strategy, so to speak, because this is the first time we've really, you know, in a recent time had this, you know, discussion about, you know, homes being lost or serious erosion, you know, really dramatic erosion happening.
Also, if that was in December, we didn't really, it was in December. I mean, we still don't know whether or not FEMA is going to even grant this award. So back in December, maybe we weren't even necessarily so sure that we needed to move forward with this request. Since then, they have given us more indications that they are likely to fund it, which meant that we need to come up with a match.
Right.
Which letter you're referring to?
So the mayor sent a letter to the chair on December 20th, you know, talking about a decrease in, you know, CPC funds, which would make it, you know, this year's, you know, job harder to find projects. One was Bartlett's, you know, the Bartlett's one, that we pulled the knock tennis courts, Woodman basketball court, Atkinson Rock Tower, and the boardwalk feasibility study. So given that this is 400,000 and we have about, by my estimation, about 1.5, given the reduction from the Swan-Ass, which was 140,000. So it's a pretty high percentage of our FY
So
25
there's,
grant funds, right?
I think, first of all, this project wasn't, this letter was, there was a letter specifically about this project that came to the chair later. And
Because it came in
it
afterwards.
came in after the deadline for the applications for CPC, which is why it's not included on here. Also, it's my understanding that there's an, open space reserve fund that does not, this project would not take out of the annual allocations from CPC. The request is for it to come from the reserves for
Okay.
open space, which is a larger pool of money.
Okay, which is why it's in that middle, maybe it's in that middle section.
It's the money that's been,
Yeah, the reserve fund is on the
Reserves.
bottom of our budget. But
Set aside for priority.
Okay.
Yeah, see, it's been saved over the course
It's
of
900.
15 years, yeah.
so this would come out of that 900,000. It would not come out of the pool of projects that you're considering for this year, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does make sense. I was just, trying to go through some stuff. I'm like, well, this is a pretty high percentage. I'm not reading it as a mayor's priority. But
I think it had more to do with the sequence.
It's not more to do with the sequence, and they're two different pockets of money, if you will, so two different letters for two different purposes.
maybe we could build a rock tower.
I was thinking maybe like the Conservation Commission, like, scout, like.
What are we gonna do?
office.
Put your office there, yeah.
Field
That'd be a
station.
great spot.
Yeah.
Just
view.
gonna tell you what.
Good
else.
view.
One little more. They have not given, we're actually, I mean, we're basically being told in the coming weeks or months, we're going to hear that answer, and that was part of the reason for mobilizing the parallel local discussion of where does that match come from, right? Because we have to be, on schedule with them, ready to go within a matter of months after that, to do all the steps after that, to the process of acquiring properties and, declaring them and so forth, so. So they were giving us notice, a heads up that we should mobilize that process because they were, like Julie said, they were giving us indications, more positively that yes, we expect this to come along again. And we don't know that definitively, but they were signaling to us that we should prepare for that, which led us to the local match we had to run. So.
Can I say something?
Yes, Jim.
Yeah, as far as like with the federal funding, it's pretty much a brand new program. So it hasn't, with all the erosion and storm damage and everything around the country, Congress decided to start funding something like this. So that's why we're just seeing it now. As far as hazard mitigation goes, why this is a hazard mitigation issue too is because during storms, if those houses are there and one comes down, all that debris starts slamming into other homes, gets on the road, causes lots more damage. And even if they're still standing there, especially the houses with foundations are gonna start concentrating water flows. So it's as big a deal for the rest of the houses around there too. I know we are gonna be experiencing sea level rise too, so this might be a lot more common thing in the future, with the increase in storms and ocean levels, so. If that clarify anybody's. Clarify
You
anybody's.
just have to go down to Plum Island and walk on the beach and you don't think you have to be a geologist or an environmental expert to see what's going on, right?
Any other questions? Any questions from the public?
We have one from Stephen Mangian.
Yeah, hi, Connie Preston, 18 Outwood Street. Let me just first compliment Julia on a really great presentation of a very complex thing. In full disclosure, we served together on the resiliency committee, so I'm very aware of this grant and what it's taken. And I think it's really important to understand too that, we can get all the way to the end zone on this, and these homeowners can still decide that they don't want to participate in this, which is very complicating to the process. But so less of a question and more of a comment, having had discussions with fellow counselors on this issue recently. I think you guys need to prepare yourself for the question of, if we're using open space funds to fund this matching grant on this, I think you need to be prepared for questions around how will we maintain this space as open space? How will we plant grass? Where will the funds come to do all of those things if this space becomes open space? Because I would definitely anticipate that as a question from other counselors.
Okay, Connie, you have any other questions?
No, I'm all set other than that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the comment. Any other questions?
Yeah, we do have one from Stephen Mangian.
Stephen?
Yes, can I confirm that you can hear me? I'm not sure if I haven't
Yes,
used the Zoom system.
We can
Okay.
hear you.
Thank you. Let me say that I know I'm late to the party and I haven't had a deep dive into just looking at the government mandated model on cost benefit analysis. But what jumps out at me in this discussion is I am a geologist and soft rock, and I know something about coastal transport. And I live in the Newbury section of Plum Island, so I don't have a dog in this fight, except to say that from what I've known all my life about the geologic effect of storms is that when you get a big storm, that's when all the sediment transport occurs. It overwhelms any day-to-day predictions about models and sediment
Stephen,
transport. May I?
Stephen, we missed about a paragraph ago, right after you were starting to talk about what happens with storms.
Sure. Let me try again, and I appreciate your indulgence. It's well known in the geologic community that most sediment transport occurs during the big storms. There is certainly day-to-day movement, but the big events are what move most of the sediment. And that said, where I sit as a geologist, you're going to get a big storm in the next 5 or 10 years, and probably more than one. And that's when the sediment's going to move. And anything you do now regarding creating some open space, the sand's going to be gone. And you're probably going to have to move the existing infrastructure. That means the water and sewer back away from the coastline. And that cost is going to be built in whether you buy the properties or not. Again, I don't have a dog in this fight because I'm in the Newbury section of town, but I think money could be better spent not purchasing these properties. A storm's going to come and take out the sand, just as happened with the Army Corps. And I'm trying to give a little bit of technical advice and perspective in saying that. And say I came late to this party in looking at the issue, but I think money is not going to be well spent trying to hold back the sea during a storm. And with that, I'll stop unless I get a question.
Thank you, Stephen. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we can thank you for your presentation and move on to the last but certainly not least. Take off my chair hat and put on my applicant hat as chair of the Open Space Committee. This is a similar application to one you've seen almost every year since we started trying to put a savings account together for future opportunities to address future opportunities to acquire open space when they come, and often they are only on the market for a very short time. And having the savings account in hand in significant amounts allows us to move on those properties and attract partners in other nonprofits and sometimes other communities to make those acquisitions. Each year over the last dozen or 15 years, we've attempted to slowly grow the savings account, and at times we've used it in increments of $200,000-300,000 at a time, and then try to rebuild it. And currently, you'll see in the budget, there's $929,000 in the open space reserve, and that's our savings account. This year's application asks to add to that savings account in the amount of $70,000. And I know there's a point in time where you say, how much do you need? And I know a city councilor asked me this last year, and I didn't give him a number, but he suggested $1 million. So, maybe that's why it's 70,000 this year, because we then rounded up to just shy of $1 million. But in any event, I think it's necessary to keep doing this and address large, significant opportunities agricultural restricted, but not being farmed, and with elderly owners that is something that we've been watching closely with Greenbelt to be prepared for an opportunity, and that would also could pertain to additional large tracts in the Little River watershed adjacent to parcels that have already been protected and acquired through the CPA in the common pasture. But keep in mind that this amount would go into a reserve, and it wouldn't be dedicated to any specific open space project until that project and that opportunity comes up. And then it comes back here for a specific recommendation to use the funds toward that project. Any questions? Okay, any questions from the public? No, seeing none? Thank you for allowing me to give my presentation, and we can move on to the next order of business, which is any other business from the chair or the planning director. I have no other business.
I think so, unless anybody have any questions for us.
Okay, any questions for Andy? No? Okay, then we've got approval of the minutes of 10/19/23 and 1/18/24. Start with the older one, 10/19/23. Keep in mind that voting on the approval of the minutes are if you were not present, you would not be voting on them. So anyone who was present at that meeting, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Okay,
Second,
okay, any questions or comments? No, all in favor of approval of the 10/19/23 minutes, please raise your hand. Okay, next, moving to the 1/18/24 minutes that have been circulated. I'll entertain a motion from anyone who was present, and I know I was not, a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
second,
Okay. In terms of questions and comments, even though I wasn't there, I did notice that Hold on, let me just grab it. We can do the corrections right now. On page one, the unable to attend, my last name and, Jen's last name.
Okay.
Misspelled.
I didn't, I'm not familiar with her yet, so.
Yeah, that's
okay.
good. And then on the third page, the middle paragraph that starts, Vice Chair Jane Ely asked for input. And then says Chuck Griffin explained he likes the efficiency of early meetings. Well, early meetings are good, but I think he meant
Open.
Open.
Meant in
yeah,
person.
in person.
Okay.
Isn't that what you
Yeah.
meant?
That's what I
I
meant.
think it was
Any
really
other questions or comments? Okay, all those who are present, who are in favor of accepting the minutes as corrected, please raise your hand. Okay. Any other questions, issues? Business? Hearing none? I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? We are adjourned.
Nice.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, before now.
I know, but there's